Who touched my wallet? The voice cut through the grand hotel lobby with the force of a fire alarm, sharp enough to silence every conversation beneath the crystal chandeliers. Guests froze beside polished marble columns. Bellhops stopped rolling brass luggage carts, and even the soft notes drifting from the grand piano seemed to disappear into the sudden stillness. Ethan Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Dynamics and one of the wealthiest men in New York, stood near the concierge desk with his jaw locked tight, and his charcoal suit still carrying the crisp lines of a man who expected the world to stay exactly where he left it. His hand searched the inside pocket of his tailored jacket again, slower this time, as if reality might change if he checked carefully enough. The wallet was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. Around him, hotel managers exchanged anxious glances while security officers quietly touched the earpieces hidden beneath their collars. The concierge swallowed hard before forcing a professional smile that never reached his eyes. "Sir, we'll locate it immediately." Ethan didn't answer. His gaze swept across the enormous lobby, reading every face the way an investor studied risk. He had spent decades building an empire worth billions of dollars, but experience had taught him that trust disappeared faster than money. Somewhere inside the hotel, someone had picked up the one thing he could never afford to lose. Within seconds, whispers traveled through the lobby like wind moving across dry leaves. Employees looked at one another, each silently hoping suspicion would settle somewhere else. Housekeepers paused with fresh towels folded neatly across their arms. Servers carrying silver trays slowed their pace. Valets avoided eye contact altogether. The atmosphere grew heavier with every passing second until footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor. Maya Williams appeared from the east corridor wearing the simple navy housekeeping uniform she had ironed herself before sunrise. A small name tag rested above her heart, and a housekeeping cart stood several feet behind her beside a row of freshly polished windows reflecting the bright Manhattan morning. In her hands rested a dark leather wallet. She didn't wave it. She didn't rush forward. She simply held it carefully with both hands, as though it belonged to something far more valuable than money. Every pair of eyes shifted toward her at once. One security guard narrowed his gaze. Another instinctively stepped into her path before she reached the center of the lobby. A hotel supervisor inhaled sharply under his breath. "That's his wallet," someone whispered. "How did she get it?" Another voice answered even more quietly. "She was cleaning this floor." The words hung in the air without accusation, yet heavy enough to change the way several people looked at her. Maya noticed every stare, every doubtful expression, every uncomfortable silence, but her pace never changed. She stopped several feet from Ethan, lifted the wallet gently, and spoke in a calm voice that barely rose above the silence surrounding them. "Sir, I believe this belongs to you." Ethan stared at the wallet without moving. His eyes then lifted to Maya's face, studying her with the careful restraint of someone who had learned never to accept appearances at face value. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound came from the quiet hum of the revolving front doors as another guest entered the hotel completely unaware that, inside the wallet resting between them, waited something neither wealth nor power had been able to recover for more than 20 years. Ethan did not reach for the wallet immediately. Instead, he watched the young housekeeper standing before him with the same careful expression he reserved for billion-dollar negotiations, searching for hesitation, fear, or the smallest crack that might reveal a hidden motive. Maya Williams offered him nothing except quiet patience. Her brown eyes remained steady, her shoulders relaxed, and her hands stayed exactly where they were, holding the wallet with the kind of respect people usually reserve for family photographs or treasured heirlooms. The silence stretched long enough for everyone nearby to become uncomfortable. Finally, Ethan accepted the wallet without saying a word. The leather felt cool against his fingertips, exactly as he remembered. Before opening it, he looked back at Maya once more. She simply nodded politely and took one small step backward, prepared to return to her housekeeping cart as though the moment were already over. She had never expected applause. She had never expected gratitude. Returning something that did not belong to her was simply the way she had been raised. 20 miles away in a modest apartment in Queens, her mother had spent years reminding her that character was measured by the choices no one else ever saw. Money came and went, she always said, but integrity stayed with a person forever. Those words had followed Maya through every difficult season of her life. After her father passed away when she was 12 years old, her mother worked double shifts cleaning office buildings until arthritis slowly stiffened her hands. Maya left community college before finishing her business degree so she could help pay the rent and cover medical appointments that insurance refused to fully support. Some mornings began before 5 o'clock. Some evenings ended well after dark. Yet she still greeted strangers with the same gentle smile because she refused to let hardship decide the kind of person she would become. The Grand Regent Hotel had become more than a workplace. It was where she quietly observed lives that looked impossibly different from her own. Wealthy executives rushed through the marble lobby, discussing mergers worth hundreds of millions of dollars, while tourists admired crystal chandeliers sparkling above polished floors. Maya noticed details other people ignored. She remembered children's names when families returned each summer. She helped elderly guests locate forgotten reading glasses without expecting recognition. More than once, she had found expensive watches, designer jewelry, and envelopes filled with cash tucked beneath beds or hidden between sofa cushions. Every single item found its way back to its owner. Some guests thanked her warmly. Others barely acknowledged her existence. Neither response changed what she believed was right. As she reached for the handle of her housekeeping cart, the hotel manager, Richard Collins, hurried toward her with measured steps and a forced professional smile that could not quite hide the concern in his face. His eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan before settling on Maya. Around them, conversations slowly returned, but they sounded different now, quieter, cautious, as though everyone since the morning was not finished revealing its surprises. Across the lobby, Ethan finally opened the wallet, his fingers moving with deliberate care, completely unaware that within the next few seconds, something resting inside would stop him colder than losing the wallet ever had. Ethan's thumb stopped halfway through the wallet. His breathing became almost imperceptible as his eyes settled on something that should not have been there. The cash was untouched, every credit card remained perfectly aligned, and his driver's license rested in its familiar slot. But tucked carefully behind an old leather divider was a faded Polaroid photograph. The edges were worn white from age, one corner slightly bent, yet the image itself remained unmistakably clear. A younger Ethan stood beside his father on a wooden fishing dock overlooking Lake George during a bright summer afternoon nearly 25 years earlier. His father had one hand resting on his shoulder, both of them smiling without the weight of board meetings, quarterly reports, or billion-dollar responsibilities. Ethan slowly removed the photograph with trembling fingers, unable to look away. He had searched for this picture countless times after his father passed away. Family albums had been emptied onto living room floors. Storage boxes had been opened and reopened. Every office drawer and safe inside his Manhattan penthouse had been inspected. He eventually accepted that the photograph had disappeared forever during one of several moves years ago. Yet here it was, resting inside the very wallet he carried every day. Richard Collins noticed the change in Ethan's expression immediately. The hotel manager stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Is everything all right, Mr. Caldwell?" Ethan did not answer. He carefully turned the photograph over. His heart skipped. On the back, written in neat blue ink that had faded with time, were 6 simple words in his father's unmistakable handwriting. "Never forget where kindness begins, son." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment as memories rushed back with startling clarity. He was 14 years old again, standing beside an old bait shop, while his father quietly paid for groceries that a struggling family could not afford. No speeches, no cameras, no expectation of recognition. His father had simply smiled afterward and said that true wealth was measured by what people chose to give away when nobody was watching. Ethan had repeated those words in interviews during the early years of his company, but somewhere along the endless climb toward success, they had become polished quotes instead of daily principles. Around him, the lobby remained unusually quiet. Employees watched discreetly from a distance, uncertain whether they were witnessing relief or disappointment. Richard glanced toward Maya, who had already resumed wiping fingerprints from a tall glass partition near the entrance. Her movements were slow and methodical, completely unaware of the storm unfolding inside Ethan's thoughts. She had not stayed to receive praise. She had not looked back to see whether he appreciated what she had done. She simply returned to the task she had been assigned before sunrise. Ethan looked once more at the photograph, then inside the empty compartment where it had been placed so carefully. Someone had found it. Someone had recognized that it belonged with the wallet instead of throwing it away as an old piece of paper. His gaze drifted across the polished lobby until it settled once again on Maya. For the first time that morning, he was no longer wondering who had found his wallet. He was wondering how a woman earning an hourly wage had protected something that even he had unknowingly given up hope of ever seeing again. Richard Collins cleared his throat and approached Ethan with the cautious confidence of someone trying to restore order before uncertainty spread any further. "Mr. Caldwell," he said carefully, "if there is anything missing, we will review every security camera and every staff log immediately." Ethan kept his eyes on the faded photograph for another long moment before sliding it gently back into the wallet. "Nothing is missing," he replied quietly. Something was returned. The distinction lingered in the air. Richard frowned slightly, unsure what Ethan meant. Around them, several employees relaxed, believing the situation had finally ended, but Ethan's attention remained fixed on Maya. She was standing beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Fifth Avenue, moving her microfiber cloth across the glass with slow, even strokes that caught the morning sunlight. Outside, yellow taxis flowed through the city while pedestrians hurried beneath the warm summer sky, unaware that inside the hotel, a simple act of honesty had begun changing the atmosphere. Ethan slipped the wallet into his jacket and walked toward her without speaking. Conversations faded once again as guests and employees instinctively stepped aside. Maya noticed his reflection in the polished glass before she turned. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked with the same calm courtesy she had shown since the beginning of the morning. Ethan looked at her for several seconds before answering. "Where did you find it?" Maya lowered the cloth into her housekeeping cart, near the west entrance, beside one of the leather lounge chairs. It looked like someone had dropped it while standing up. Ethan nodded slightly. "And the photograph?" For the first time, Maya seemed surprised by the question. "It was underneath the chair," she answered honestly. The wallet was a few inches away, but the picture had slid beneath the front leg. "At first I thought it belonged to another guest, but when I checked the outside of the wallet for identification, I realized it had probably fallen out when it hit the floor." Ethan listened without interrupting. "You opened the wallet?" he asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. Maya gave a small nod. "Only long enough to find your driver's license so I could return it to the right person. I did not read anything else. When I found the photograph under the chair, I placed it back exactly where it seemed to belong." Ethan looked down briefly, his fingers resting against the edge of his jacket pocket. "Did you know how much cash was inside?" Maya smiled politely and shook her head. "No, sir. I never counted it. It was not mine to count." Richard, who had quietly followed several steps behind, exchanged a quick glance with two security officers. Neither of them spoke. Maya continued with quiet sincerity. "My mother always told me that once you begin measuring someone else's belongings, you stop appreciating your own character. So I never looked." The words were simple, spoken without drama or expectation, yet they landed with unexpected weight. Ethan felt them settle somewhere deeper than memory. He had spent years surrounded by people who negotiated every conversation for advantage, every favor for influence, every opportunity for profit. Standing before him now was someone who had chosen honesty when nobody was watching, even while carrying burdens he could scarcely imagine. For the first time in many years, Ethan found himself questioning whether success had quietly pulled him farther away from the values that had built his life in the first place. The lobby slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but something invisible had shifted beneath the polished surface. Guests resumed checking in, suitcases rolled across the marble floor once again, and the pianist quietly continued the melody that had been interrupted earlier. Yet Ethan remained standing beside the tall windows, unable to shake the quiet conviction growing inside him. He had attended board meetings worth billions of dollars without feeling what he felt now. One honest decision made by someone the world rarely noticed had unsettled years of carefully built certainty. Richard Collins glanced at his watch before stepping closer. "Mr. Caldwell, your car is waiting for the shareholder luncheon. They are expecting you in Midtown within 30 minutes. Ethan acknowledged him with a slight nod, but made no move toward the revolving doors. Instead, he looked back at Maya, who had already returned to replacing fresh towels on a housekeeping cart as though the morning had been entirely ordinary. There was no attempt to remain near him, no hopeful glance, no expectation of reward. She simply continued working, with the same quiet discipline that had guided every minute of her shift. Ethan found himself wondering how many remarkable people passed through his companies every day without ever being truly seen. Across the lobby, two hotel employees whispered softly while organizing luggage near the concierge desk. One of them looked toward Maya before lowering his voice. "I heard she works extra weekends too." The other nodded. "Her mother has medical appointments every month. She never complains, though." Neither realized Ethan had overheard every word. He slipped one hand into his jacket pocket, feeling the outline of the old photograph resting safely inside the wallet. His father's handwriting echoed once more in his mind. "Never forget where kindness begins, son." For years he had interpreted those words as advice about charitable donations and corporate foundations. Standing inside the Grand Regent Hotel, he suddenly realized his father had meant something much simpler. Kindness began long before headlines, speeches, or public recognition. It began in ordinary moments when nobody expected anything in return. Ethan turned toward Richard. "Tell me about Maya Williams." Richard appeared surprised. "She has been with us almost 3 years. Excellent attendance. Never any complaints from guests. In fact, we regularly receive handwritten compliments mentioning her by name." Ethan listened carefully. "Has she ever asked for special treatment?" Richard shook his head immediately. "Never. She actually volunteers to cover shifts when someone calls in sick." Ethan looked back across the lobby once again. Maya was helping an elderly couple understand the elevator buttons with patient, respectful kindness. After making sure they reached the correct floor, she smiled warmly and quietly continued her work without lingering for thanks. The couple waved as the elevator doors closed. Maya simply returned to polishing a brass handrail that reflected the afternoon sunlight like liquid gold. Ethan noticed something else then. She carried herself with quiet dignity that did not depend on expensive clothing, powerful titles, or anyone else's approval. It reminded him of someone he had not thought about in years. His father had walked exactly the same way. Calm, unhurried, certain that doing the right thing required no audience. Ethan reached into his pocket once more and gently touched the edge of the faded photograph. Then his fingers paused. Hidden behind the old picture was something he had not noticed before, a small folded piece of yellowed paper tucked so carefully between the leather lining that it had escaped his attention for decades, and as he slowly eased it free, he realized he had never seen it before in his life. Ethan unfolded the small piece of yellowed paper with extraordinary care, afraid that one careless movement might tear something that had survived decades hidden inside worn leather. The paper crackled softly between his fingers, carrying the unmistakable scent of age, old ink, and forgotten years. Around him, the elegant hotel lobby continued its steady rhythm of rolling suitcases, quiet conversations, and polished professionalism, yet those sounds seemed impossibly distant. For the first time in many years, the world outside his hands no longer demanded his attention. His eyes settled on the familiar handwriting that covered the fragile note. It belonged to his father. There was no signature at the top, no formal greeting, only a simple sentence written with calm confidence. "If you are reading this one day, it means life has carried you farther than I ever could." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He continued reading slowly, almost afraid of reaching the end. "Wealth will open many doors for you, but kindness will open the hearts that money never can. Never judge the worth of a person by the clothes they wear, the work they do, or the color of their skin. One honest soul is worth more than a room full of powerful people pretending to have character." Ethan lowered the letter without realizing his grip had begun to tremble. The sunlight pouring through the enormous glass windows reflected gently across the polished marble floor, surrounding him with a warm glow that somehow felt different from only minutes earlier. Richard noticed the silence and wisely chose not to interrupt. Across the lobby, Maya knelt beside a young boy, whose toy truck had rolled underneath a leather armchair. She smiled warmly as she reached beneath the chair, dusted the small truck with a clean towel, and handed it back with both hands. The little boy's face brightened immediately. His mother thanked Maya with genuine appreciation before leading her son toward the elevators. Maya simply smiled again and returned to arranging fresh flowers on a nearby reception table. She never looked toward Ethan. She had no idea that, without saying another word, she had become the living reflection of the very lesson written by a man she had never met. Ethan slowly folded the letter along the same delicate creases that had protected it for so many years. He slipped it back behind the photograph, his movements almost reverent, as though placing an irreplaceable treasure back where it belonged. He suddenly realized something that left him standing perfectly still. If Maya had not noticed the photograph beneath the chair, she never would have searched carefully enough to reunite it with the wallet. If she had taken the easier path and simply handed over the wallet without looking for what had fallen nearby, the letter might have remained hidden beneath that lounge chair until a vacuum cleaner, a trash bin, or time itself erased it forever. One quiet decision, made by someone earning an hourly wage and expecting nothing in return, had restored not only a photograph, but also the final words his father had intended him to find. Ethan looked through the sunlight toward Maya once more, and for the first time that morning, he understood that the greatest thing she had returned to him was not something that could fit inside a wallet. It was the part of himself he had slowly forgotten while spending years chasing success. For several quiet moments, Ethan remained exactly where he stood, the folded letter resting safely inside his wallet and his father's words echoing louder than the countless speeches he had delivered over the years. The sunlight drifting through the towering windows softened the sharp edges of the marble lobby, making everything appear warmer, almost gentler than it had that morning. He watched Maya finish, arranging the fresh white lilies at the reception desk before she lifted her housekeeping cart and prepared to continue down the hallway leading toward the guest suites. She moved with the same quiet confidence as before, unaware that every assumption Ethan had carried about success, status, and human worth had begun to shift because of one simple choice she had made. "Miss Williams," Ethan called softly. His voice was calm now, completely different from the urgency that had filled the lobby earlier. Maya stopped and turned. "Yes, sir," she answered with the same respectful tone. Ethan walked toward her until only a few feet separated them. Richard Collins and several nearby employees instinctively paused, sensing that something important was about to happen. Ethan looked directly into Maya's eyes before speaking. "I owe you more than a thank you." Maya offered a modest smile and shook her head gently. "You do not owe me anything, sir. I only returned what belonged to you." Ethan slowly removed the old photograph and the folded letter from his wallet before holding them carefully in his hands. "You returned these," he said quietly. "I did not even know the letter was still inside." Maya looked genuinely surprised. "I am glad it found its way back to you." Ethan lowered his eyes to the faded handwriting one last time before carefully placing both treasures back inside the wallet. "This letter was written by my father many years ago. I searched for the photograph for a long time, but I never knew this message had been hidden behind it." Maya listened silently, allowing him the space to continue. "Everything I built," Ethan said, glancing briefly around the elegant lobby, "started because my father believed character mattered more than money. Somewhere along the way, I remembered the lessons but forgot how to live them." Maya's expression remained kind, never judgmental. "Sometimes life becomes loud," she replied softly. "The important things do not disappear. They simply wait for us to notice them again." Richard quietly lowered his eyes, struck by the simplicity of her words. Ethan smiled for what felt like the first genuine time that day. It was not the confident smile seen on magazine covers or business television interviews. It was smaller, quieter, and undeniably real. "My father would have liked you," he said. Maya let out a gentle laugh. "I hope he would have been proud of you too." The sentence settled over Ethan with unexpected weight. No one had spoken to him that way in years. Not as a billionaire. Not as the head of a global company. Simply as a son whose father had hoped he would become a good man. Ethan took a slow breath and looked around the lobby once more. The employees who had watched from a distance no longer seemed like invisible members of a workforce. They looked like individuals with families, struggles, dreams, and stories he had never taken the time to understand. As Maya reached once again for the handle of her housekeeping cart, Ethan realized the greatest surprise inside his wallet had never been the photograph or the forgotten letter. It was the unexpected reminder that the values capable of changing a life could still arrive in the quiet hands of someone the world too often failed to truly see. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the marble floor as guests continued moving through the Grand Regent Hotel, but for those who had witnessed the quiet exchange, the atmosphere no longer felt quite the same. Ethan stood silently for another moment before turning toward Richard Collins. His voice was calm, yet every word carried unmistakable purpose. Please gather the department supervisors in the executive conference room at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Richard blinked. Today, sir. Ethan nodded. Today. Within hours, managers from every department filled the elegant conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Housekeeping supervisors sat beside finance directors, concierge managers beside security leaders, each wondering why one of the country's most respected business executives had requested an unscheduled meeting inside a hotel that was not even part of his company. Maya had no idea any meeting was taking place. She spent the afternoon changing bed linens, organizing guest amenities, and helping a family locate a misplaced stroller. Her workday unfolded exactly as every other shift had. Shortly after 4 o'clock, Richard quietly knocked on the housekeeping office door. Maya, he said with a warm smile, would you mind joining us upstairs for a moment? She looked surprised. Did I forget something? Richard gently shook his head. No, someone would simply like to thank you properly. A few minutes later, Maya stepped into the conference room wearing the same neatly pressed housekeeping uniform she had worn since dawn. She paused near the doorway, immediately noticing dozens of managers seated around the polished oak table. Ethan stood beside the windows overlooking the city, the familiar wallet resting in his hand. He smiled as she entered. Please come in. Maya walked forward slowly, uncertain why she had been invited. Ethan looked around the room before speaking. This morning, every person in this hotel saw someone return a lost wallet. Several people nodded quietly. What most of you did not see, Ethan continued, was that she also returned something I believed I had lost forever. He carefully removed the old photograph and the folded letter, holding them where everyone could see without revealing the personal words written inside. These reminded me that integrity cannot be measured by income, job titles, or appearances. It is revealed by what someone chooses to do when no one is expecting recognition. The room fell completely silent. Ethan turned toward Maya. Miss Williams, I would like to offer you a position within the Caldwell Foundation. We support educational scholarships, family assistance programs, and community initiatives across the country. We need people whose character inspires trust before they ever speak a single word. Maya looked genuinely overwhelmed. She lowered her eyes for a brief moment before answering softly. That is an incredible honor, sir. Ethan smiled. Then I hope you will accept. Maya took a slow breath before looking back at him. May I ask for one day to think about it? Ethan seemed pleasantly surprised. Of course. She smiled warmly. My mother always taught me never to make important decisions without first thanking God and speaking with family. Ethan nodded with quiet respect. Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman. Maya's smile grew slightly brighter. She is the reason I know the difference between earning a paycheck and earning peace. No one spoke for several seconds after that. The words lingered in the conference room with a quiet strength that no presentation or business strategy could have matched. Ethan realized that once again, the person with the smallest title had quietly delivered the greatest lesson. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the towering windows of the Grand Regent Hotel, painting long ribbons of gold across the polished marble floor that had witnessed yesterday's extraordinary moment. New guests arrived carrying suitcases, fresh flowers decorated the reception desk, and the familiar melody of the grand piano drifted gently through the lobby. To everyone else, it seemed like another ordinary morning in one of Manhattan's finest hotels. Maya Williams walked through the employee entrance a few minutes before 6 o'clock, wearing the same neatly pressed housekeeping uniform and carrying the same quiet determination she had carried every day for nearly 3 years. Nothing about her appearance suggested that her life had changed. She greeted the security guard with a warm smile, signed the attendance log, and pushed her housekeeping cart toward the guest elevators just as she always had. She had spent the previous evening talking with her mother over a simple homemade dinner, and together they had prayed before making a decision. Maya knew opportunities could change a career, but she also believed they should never change a person's heart. As she reached the center of the lobby, she noticed someone standing beside the front entrance looking out toward Fifth Avenue. Ethan Caldwell turned as soon as he heard the quiet wheels of the housekeeping cart rolling across the marble. He was dressed more casually than the day before, without the usual entourage or tightly scheduled meetings waiting for him. He smiled and walked toward her. "Good morning, Maya." She smiled back. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." He nodded toward the cart. "You came back." Maya let out a soft laugh. "I still have rooms to prepare, sir." Ethan smiled, appreciating the simplicity of the answer. "Have you made your decision?" Maya looked toward the sunlight reflecting across the lobby before answering. "Yes, I would be honored to work with your foundation, but only after I finish my notice here. This hotel gave me an opportunity when I needed one most. I want to leave the right way." Ethan stood quietly for a moment before extending his hand. "That is exactly the answer I hoped you would give." Maya shook his hand gently. Nearby employees watched with quiet admiration as one of the most influential businessmen in America thanked a housekeeper with the same respect he offered executives and investors. There were no television cameras, no reporters, and no prepared speeches. Only genuine gratitude shared between two people whose lives had unexpectedly changed because of a single honest decision. Before leaving, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and carefully removed the old wallet. He looked at it for a brief moment before placing it back inside with the photograph and his father's letter resting safely together once again. "Yesterday," he said softly, "I thought someone returned my wallet. Today I understand that you returned something much greater." Maya smiled with the quiet confidence that had always guided her. "Sometimes people do not lose what matters most," she replied. "They simply need someone to help them find it again." Ethan nodded, unable to think of a better answer. As Maya continued pushing her housekeeping cart down the bright hallway, the morning sunlight followed her across the marble floor, reflecting softly against the polished brass railings. Ethan remained where he was, watching until she disappeared around the corner. He no longer saw a housekeeper beginning another shift. He saw a reminder that true greatness was never measured by wealth, status, or power, but by the quiet courage to choose integrity when nobody was watching. And in the peaceful silence that followed, his father's words finally felt complete.